Uh, I'll tell you why I scheduled this movie. I thought it was just a very fun movie, very exciting, and extremely well told when I first saw it. And I had my doubts, as you know from my announcement, that it's kind of racy, and the first 40 minutes is like a uh, a teenage romp through the world of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And but then it changes, and I can go into the moments where it changes, but it kind of divides up into thirds. The playfulness up until the wedding, and then another 40 minutes later, it's uh, when they finally catch him, they find him, and then there's the recovery and going back to LA, to New York. And so it's kind of like a traditional structure, although it's so long and detailed. It's 2 hours and 20 minutes. There's so many details to each part of the action. There's a lot of repetition. And for me, my criticism of the director and writer is he gave us too many examples of the sex and drugs and too many examples of partying, leading up to the marriage, and too much celebration after the marriage, and too many instances of hunting for him. That chase, by the way, the big fight scene in the middle is 11 minutes long, where she destroys the place. Beautifully choreographed. And it plays into things later. Remember, at the end, she says, "Why did you assault me?" But we'll come back to that. So I think that may have affected, well, tell me, did that affect anybody's opinion that it was just too much of the same thing until it moved on to the next topic, the next part of it? Anybody have feelings about that? Arlene, I see you're speaking, but you're muted. Lower left corner, little micro. There you go.
There I go. Oh,
Yeah,
that was my problem when the first time I went to see it.
yeah.
Uh, it had become just too much of the playing around and the sex part, and I couldn't get past it, so I turned it off.
Uh-huh.
But then when it won the Oscar, I said, well, maybe I better watch it through, And certainly it was an excellent film, but I still loved Emilia Perez.
Okay, fine.
Yeah,
Why did you feel it was an excellent film despite I mean, what was long before and too much fucking was still long and too much fucking for you, right?
yeah, that's right.
How did
And
you overcome that and decide you liked it and called it an excellent film?
I thought it was the acting.
Uh-huh.
The young people, the from when they finally found him, um, it that part of it was inexplicable. I didn't even know how they found him, um,
Yeah.
but
She
um,
realized it was probably the place where she met him at work. It's called headquarters, HQ, she says. How
yeah,
she stumbled on that and didn't think of it earlier, I don't know. But they went to a bunch of other clubs
right.
and video parlors and restaurants. And, it's like, okay, we get it. We get it. He's hard to find. But I have to say, seeing it a second time this afternoon, there's so much humor in it. I mean, some of these one-liners, you know, a simple one is Garnick throws up in the car and Toro says, "What are you doing? My wife has to drive this car tomorrow." It's like these thugs, I have like mainstream worries about their spouses, some of them. And there's just a million of those. And I laughed out loud. My wife said to me, "Well, you certainly enjoyed it this time." I didn't realize the first time I saw it how funny it was, and how good the performances are, even among the lesser actors. Everybody was into it. Linda Schatzer has her hand raised. Yeah, you're muted though. You gotta, raise your hand and unmute yourself, or unraise your hand
Yeah.
and.
I also thought it was pretty humorous. And even though there was the repetition, it kind of portrayed for me her life, that she really had a very bleak kind of existence, with getting up, going to the sex shop and her customers and kind of like a day to day. But the humor. I mean, even when I first saw the guy who she winds up with, I mean, he looked like a kid. I mean, he was so skinny and, certainly unappealing. And, all of a sudden, it's like Cinderella met the prince. So, that was funny. And I thought that his mother, I mean, the family, but it was almost like stereotypes of the Russian mob. So, I'm originally from Brooklyn. So, it really, that whole area of Brighton Beach, which is
Yeah.
still the same with Tatiana's and the restaurants and the whole place is Russian with all the signage and the cleaners and the bakeries, everything is Russian. And it was almost to me like, making a satiric comment on all that's still there in that community. Although it's 2025, it's been that way for like the last 40 years and it doesn't change. So I zoned in also on the acting. I thought the acting was really good. And while it was uneven, it was very creative and original, and it kept me through the whole story.
It did. I agree about the performances. I find her performance to be very nuanced. I'm just studying her face and the control of her eyebrows and her frowns and her lips, and she conveys so much without saying anything sometimes. And the reactions are sometimes hilarious. I didn't write them all down, but I just couldn't stop watching her because she was really acting without words much of the time. When she wasn't saying fuck, but that's okay. It's like you say it enough and it passes right through you, as Eileen found. Um, it's like, let me refer to my notes since we've seen, but I want to talk about the front part of it. The first 40 minutes um, is the lead up to the marriage. And she meets him at six and a half minutes in, which is good, but they spend all of that 6.5 minutes doing what? Anybody knows? Showing her proficiency as a lap dance girl, how she works the customers, how she has the right thing to say to all of them, how she improvises with them. She's a master salesperson and very successful and a prized worker because the boss doesn't want to give her a week off, let alone the last day he gave her. So again, 6 minutes is a long time because it's all the same courtship um, of customers on her part, but she's a skilled salesperson. Um, and there's even a very funny line that starts here. So one guy, she says, it'll cost you to go to the VIP room. And she says, well, I don't have any cash. He said, well, let's go to the ATM together. It's like she's got an answer for everything to further her interests. And then uh, uh, one of the girls says to the other, 40 is geriatric. The guy that we're seeing is a geriatric 40-year-old. To us, it's hilarious. So maybe that's what the Brits liked about it, something. And then they spend this New Year's Eve together. And again, she demonstrates her salesmanship with Yvonne. Uh, he offers her 10,000 to spend New Year's Eve with him. And she asks for 15. He says, okay, what's another 5K? And then the joke is, he says to her, I would have asked 30. You could have gone to 30 and I would have paid. Which, to this boy, he looks 17, younger than she even. Uh, money has no meaning to him. It's just a plaything, an instrument to get playthings. I thought that was very amusing and very interesting. And again, you begin to learn the depth of his wealth when the morning after New Year's, the cleaning crew comes in, 3 people mopping up from the celebration the night before. And you begin to see the expanse of the mansion. And she goes back, he proposes they spend another week together, a week together. And she goes back to her boss and he says, no, 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 I gave you a day off. You got to work. And she says, you give me benefits, health benefits, a 401k, and then we can talk. Which is, again, it's like sex workers demanding their rights as employees, which, but it's done in such a funny way. And she's so strong a personality and knows who she is and knows what she wants. she's got this part of her life down. You know, she can live with it because she deals with it as a business. Um, and then there's lots of sex even after 29 minutes between the two of them. And there's a lovely scene. It happens more than once where he's playing a video game and she's leaning on his chest, you know, and kind of tender, right? And you know, there's the cars. He shows her the garage with all the fancy cars in it. They go to the candy shop. They go to the beach. Very, Lindy said Brighton Beach, there's this very large woman in an old-fashioned bathing suit wading into the freezing water, which I believe is the Russian polar bears, which they do very often there in the winter. They as a restorative. Uh, so again, and then they have massages, and he says, "Are you happy?" She said, "Yes, I'm very happy." And uh, then they go to Vegas. You know, it's like, oh, we're bored. What do we do? Well, we'll go to Vegas and get more drunk and do more cocaine. And he teases the host who comes to greet them. Oh, we're sorry, not room's ready. We didn't know you were coming. And he pretends to throw a hissy fit and then tells the guy, I'm just kidding. We'll wait for our room. But it's like that kind of entitled, uh, they know they can be a little bit cruel with other people because they're in control of the relationship. You know, it's one use of wealth. And then there's um, one interesting scene. They do a lot of gambling. They go in a limo. And then, I don't know if you notice this, they're getting injections in their arms. He says, give us a double dose because we're going to outdo ourselves tonight. So these are shots like B12 shots to rejuvenate them and get over last night's hangover and other things in their system. It wasn't really made a thing of, but you saw the lady with gloves and their arms extended for her. And then the marriage proposal comes at 39 minutes. And there's this happy dancing in the mall after the wedding. And he shouts out, I'm an American because I married an American woman. And, you know, he's this kid with the best toy he could have imagined, which is a wife and a passport, you know, a hot wife and a passport. And I thought that was a great scene. His performance is just wonderful there. Um, and then she announces to the workers she's getting married, and she always wanted to honeymoon at Disney World. So that's kind of a class designation of this working class girl. You see where she lives with her grandmother, I suppose, with the train behind it. So that's not a high rent street. And it sort of fills in the blanks with her uh, uh, where she's coming from and how she's been able to make peace with her. She's not a prostitute. She's an exotic dancer, right? That's she can make those distinctions, even though she does go off for private sessions. Um, and she tells him jealousy is a disease. And I'm wondering, is this wisdom from her? Does she know it from experience? Does she have no jealousy? It's a curious line there, but it makes her seem wiser again than you might have thought she was. Because what exotic dancer would ever say that? And then, bingo, after they're married, the priest, the Armenian priest, gets the phone call in the middle of a baptism. He's holding the baby and he has to reach under his robe to get his cell phone. All these little things are just very funny. And uh, I want to go backwards, though. There's one moment when he proposes to her in the very beginning. She thinks he's kidding. And she doesn't believe it because she's this hardened lap dancer, this, you know, exotic dancer. And slowly she's won over. And it totally changes her persona to being this little teenage girl who finally Prince Charming has arrived and is even nice, you know, and he's kind and he's rich. And so she does a bit of a turn there. And she continues to be a more submissive person in her new role as wife. Not that you have to submit to much with him. He keeps you well fed and well clothed in mink coats and 4 carat diamond rings and plenty of drugs. But she seems to me at this point that she's a passive little girl, right? and I don't mean she's a complicit. She's compliant, and there's less of an edge to her in these scenes. And then there's the goons are in the car on their way to find out because the uh, Toros, the priest, sends Garnick, and Igor to the house to find out did he really get married. And there's this funny thing where they're having sex and the door knocks. Who is it? I don't know. And he has to keep them out. And finally, they let them in, and they want to see the marriage certificate. And of course, he takes a photograph of it on his cell phone. And uh, Tauros arrives, and this is a very long scene, and starts, berating her and telling her the marriage wasn't legal. So, Marina, you want to chime in?
Yes, I just wanted to clarify that, in my opinion, Taurus is not a priest. He was the godfather in the
Maybe,
ceremony.
maybe.
Yeah,
There was a priest.
Was in all of
the crescent, the whatever
yes,
you call it.
he was
Yeah,
dressed
that
as
was the priest, but he was.
But that shows that he's a very respected person
Yes,
in the community. He is of high standing, and he's ruining this ceremony
Yep.
for the family because in the middle of the ceremony he leaves. It's even worse than if the priest has left.
Right.
And he's the pillar of our society, but he's involved with mafia stuff.
Yeah. So eventually, Annie, has a fight with Garnick, and she kicks him in the nose and pushes him back, and he starts bleeding. And everything was fine, they explained to Toros, until she happened. It's like she's not a person, she's a hurricane that beset them. It was a very funny line. And then after uh, Toros questions her about the nature of their relationship, the wedding, she starts crying rape and doesn't stop screaming. And the guys just don't know what to do. And Igor assures her everything will be okay. And of course, it isn't, won't be. But this is a very long fight scene. It's about 8 minutes long. And that was so well choreographed. It just looks like there happened to be a glass object near her feet, which she could kick over, several of them. But it was all organic, and it's told in a wide shot, mostly. And Toro says, well, we're going to buy you out. We'll give you 10K for an annulment fee, but you have no contact with Ivan. So, but Ivan has run away, and she is detained by Igor. And this sort of is the beginning of the third act, where now it's about the search for Ivan. And they break up the candy shop, and they go to Tatiana's, and they walk the boardwalk, and that's where we see the beginning of a relationship between Igor, the goon, and Annie because of the red scarf. He kept it, and he offers it to her to keep her neck warm in the winds. And first she refuses it, and then they're walking back from Tatiana's to the car. And when they get there, the tow truck has hoisted up Toros's car, and he gets in and he drives it off the hoist, and they flee. It's very funny. I mean, whoever could have done that? I don't know if it's possible, but it's like a very inventive. It advances the plot very inventively, and Baker always throws in these hitches, these complications that are fun getting out of. And, he's a master prankster, this director. And they go everywhere, the video game gallery, the billiards parlor, and then Garnick throws up in the car, and, Torres's wife has to drive it the next day. And Annie dismisses Igor, doesn't want to talk to him in the back seat. Right. They go to clubs. She proudly says, that's not mink, it's sable. It's even rarer. They go to more clubs, and eventually Ivan stumbles into her club. And Annie, at that time, they haven't found him yet, but she wants to get away from Igor. And they stop at his grandmother's apartment so he can get drugs for Garnick, which makes him sick. Um, and there's a big confrontation at the headquarters, the strip club. And then the next morning, the lawyer shows up and they're trying to get it annulled. So all of them go to court. Um, uh, Ivan is totally hungover. He's totally wasted. It's a very funny scene. You know, the Armenian lawyer meets them at the curbside, and there's a warning: don't let them tow my truck. And they go in, and uh, there's a shouting match in the courtroom. It's very funny. You know why you know the judge ever tolerated it. And then Ivan passes out on the plaintiff's bench in the courtroom. Very funny stuff. And Toros keeps saying she has no right to talk here, you know, because it's not her annulment, it's theirs. And that's where we learn mom and dad are arriving tomorrow. And uh, eventually they return to the plane. They say, we're going to get a divorce. We've got to go. And when she realizes that Yvonne, did anybody notice a change in Yvonne when, Marina will bear it with you, when Yvonne says, no, come on, we have to go. She feels betrayed. Don't you want to annul me? You want a divorce? And he's so hungover, he can't really answer. But in that moment, it's almost an hour into it, she grows up. She realizes that this knight in shining armor or this young man whom she thought she could have a real life with is not the guy for her. He can't be. He's not mature enough. She was ready to be an in-love, mature person, an adult. But he's not, and she didn't see it until this moment where it feels like he's betraying her. And he is in a way. Igor watches. Igor's always watching and not commenting, but you see him observing her. Every now and then they sneak in a close-up of him. He's in the scene, but not of the scene, right? I thought, a very clever touch because he's going to become a very important player later. You'd think, as I remembered the film, that before she gets on the plane, she's going to play her card and said, I'll only go if you give me the house or you give me the money or, you know, whatever. But she goes. And then what happens? Oh, the mother arrives. I mean, yes, they're stereotypical Russian mobsters, but their relationship is hilarious too. The woman is the firebrand fashion designer, and the wealthy henpecked husband, who's probably supported her fashion career, you know, is kind of sanguine, and he gets a good laugh when Igor says to her, so Yvonne says to her, I just married you to spite you, or no, that's what Annie says to the mother. He married me to spite you for all the cruelty and the coldness you've shown him his whole life. And then another funny line is, you know, you never give me any freedom, Mom. Like you wouldn't even let me marry a man. You know, it's like, not that I want to, but you know, it's like, come on, you're so constraining and you're not modern. Is that freedom? It's hilarious that this heterosexual guy is arguing this. And then it begins to get worse. On the plane, she hears Yvonne call her an escort. You know, Mom's been calling her a prostitute. She's protested it. You know, I'm not a prostitute. I'm an exotic dancer. But he says, come on, Mom, you're making too much out of this. I just had some fun with an escort for a week. What are you doing? And that makes her livid. She storms into their part of the cabin and she says, you're pussy whipped. You're awful. You know, fuck all of you. And when she gets back to her seat, Igor offers her a glass of water. In cut crystal, of course, you know. But it's like, he's sensitive to her needs. That's what that gesture means. Quietly, he's saying, I see you. I see your situation in this. They're being really mean to you. And, you know, this development of Igor, I think it's probably one of the more subtle parts of the movie where they're developing this character who's going to be very important later, super important at the end. um, into a major character. And then as they're leaving, Igor speaks up. He says, "Excuse me, it's not my place, but don't you think it would be good if Ivan apologizes to Annie?" I mean, that I'm surprised that the line almost didn't belong there, because why would that kind of guy speak up? He's been holding it in all this time. Why come show his cards and defend her, even though that's what he's been feeling? So I question that. But the dad laughs, uh, uh, and laughs at the rebellion of his son against his mother around that time. And so the dad is enjoying a good joke on his wife, on the mother, which, sort of defines his long-suffering tolerance of his wife. And now we're into past 2 hours, and this is where the film, I think, gets really, really smart. Igor's going to take you back to New York. And what's the change in her then? The next morning he takes her to the bank, she gets her money, and then they spend the night at the house before they have to leave. What's going on there? Why has her tone changed? Well, she's sullen, isn't she? She's been sort of like been had and been manipulated and dumped. Her heart's been broken. But I think she's wise enough at this point to know that this young man was never capable of being a good husband, whatever that means to a woman like her, whatever that means. But Igor, after sharing the joy, he begins to break through. And she says, "What does your name mean?" He said, "It means warrior." And she says, "Well, you're not a warrior. You're just a goon listening to other people's commands." And he says, "Touche." Right? And she gets it. Oh, you mean touche? Right? Yeah, I forgot where that was headed. And then he says, "It's good you're not part of this family. I just tried to support you." And she says, "Then why did you rape me? Or why didn't you rape me? You had rape in your eyes. I knew you were a rapist. So I was afraid of you." And that which comes to this very simple delivery that he says, "Well, I didn't rape you because I'm not a rapist." And sometimes something delicate and simple like that really proves character for me. It was a real breakthrough line for him, because it says, I'm not really a thug. I may be a thug, but I'm not a rapist. I have my limits. And then, of course, she's still so angry. She says, "Yeah, you're a fag ass bitch. I mean, you're gay, so of course that's why you do want to rape me." And then she goes away. And the next morning she wakes up to see the snow, and he drives her to the bank and then home. And what does he do next in the car? Takes her bags up, comes back, gives her the ring that he took from Toros. Right? This is a 3 or 4 carat diamond, so it was quite valuable. So she's got more than the $10,000 right there. And it kind of like, sorry, he takes her bags up after that, and she thinks in the car about what's the meaning of giving me the ring? Why would he do that? And for me, this is where the whole film leads to, and why it's so satisfying. I hate to spill the beans by talking so much, but what did you people think of what happens after he returns to the car and she starts talking to him? Where does it go? Natalie? Unmute. Lower left.
Okay, good. I think that was the whole point of all of her, everything that she did. Her job was a way of making money. She did it well, and she went to work every day and had no feeling at all for any of the people or anything that she was doing. I also thought she had no feeling for the Russian guy either. She was very smart too. And this was a way of her getting out of her working world and being very wealthy. It had nothing to do that she liked him. I think the whole thing, everything up to the very end was an act with her. And it kind of excused her for me for all that she did, because we all go to work. We do things that we have to do to make money.
And this is what she did without any concern that she was having sex and getting naked and pretending she was nice to everyone. And that last scene.
Stop there.
Oh, you want me to stop?
Yeah,
Oh.
I mean, we're in the last scene, but I don't want to go to the very end of it.
Okay.
What does this tell her about her whole life up to that point? It was transactional. It was
Right.
only about the
That's
money.
exactly what I meant.
But it was tit for tat.
That
You
was it.
do
She had
this, you know, it's
no
like
feeling.
no feeling.
No
Nobody means
feeling.
anything to me.
Nothing.
And
that excused it all.
And when she met Yvonne, she thought, oh my God, he could mean something to me. So she went along with it like this little girl who'd met Prince Charming. She invested and believed when she believed in nothing before that.
However, think about it. He gave her that ring. He didn't touch her the whole night. This was a guy who was really genuine in the feelings he had for her.
Yeah.
He felt sorry for her when she says to him, why did you held me and you almost pulled my arms off and all of that. And his answer was, I was afraid they were going to.
Okay, that's Igor. But let's talk about Yvonne. Let's go back to the proposal. You know, he says, let's get married, and she doesn't believe it.
Oh, yeah.
And then we'll come back to your point, Natalie. And, you know, she's still this cynical, transactional woman. And then when she asks again, and he says, I asked you twice, she melts. She reverts back to that innocent little girl who wants to be saved by a man. Maybe not saved is too strong a word, but wants a man.
Well, I hate to disagree with you, but I never saw that in the film at all.
Watch it again. I think you'll see her change from cynical woman to willing a bride. That's the moment I'm talking about. When she finally agrees to them. No, you don't think she...
You know, we don't have to always agree with one another.
No, we don't.
Okay. I think she buys into the fantasy.
I think she loved the idea she was going to be wealthy.
Okay.
But she's buying into it.
She's buying into it.
She was disbelieving before, and it was just a phony act.
Well, as a transaction, go ahead. As a transactional person, it's like finally this is a deal she couldn't refuse. You know?
Yeah, right. Up to that point, it's
bullshit,
bullshit. Yeah. And then, all right, for like 5 minutes, he seemed sincere.
Back to the video,
which triggered off the delusion, essentially, that maybe there's something really here.
She's very affectionate. She's leaning against him while he's playing with his video game more than once, and
I mean, she wanted to be deluded.
Yes. Okay. It was the romance she never really had in all her sexual contacts. It's what was missing, even if it was a fantasy only from her perspective. He just, you know, okay, it's nice that this attractive woman is leaning on me, but I'm into my video game. I'm about to take an action, he says. They leave me alone. But she just wants to play into her game, her fantasy, that she finally has a romantic outlet for a very natural desire. So, but going back to the car, Natalie, I'm saying her reaction, you know, he gives her the ring. He goes out, takes the bags up the stairs, looks back. She's still in the car. He comes back down and gets in the car. And I forget the line, but she takes off her coat and then begins to mount him. And it's like, this is the only way this woman knows how to express affection. This is the tragedy of the movie, that not only has she regressed into childhood, but she's also regressed from the hopefulness of a child adult. She's regressed back into her transactional life. This is the only way she has of thanking him for the ring, for not raping her.
Right.
You know, and that's what's sad. And she proceeds, she hitches up her skirt and she unbuckles his pants, and they begin to get into it. And he eventually reaches up to hold her face as though he's into it. And then she pushes back and she beats against his chest, not with the ferocity that she did in the fight earlier, which was savage. It's like a little girl whimpering against a stronger force. And it's like, it's not really Igor she's angry with. She's like bemoaning her fate. She's crying for herself and collapses into his arms.
Because I saw it a little differently. I understand what you're saying.
How did you think it?
For the first time, with all this sex that she's been doing day and night, she had an orgasm that was true. She felt something for him. She had an emotional, that's how I saw it.
Okay.
And that's what made
I question the orgasm, but not that she felt something.
but that, yes, no, for the first time, that's the way I saw it. That's what made the whole movie terrific, was that for the first time, she truly, with the sexual act, felt something, because
Yes,
this was
that
this was the first person who really cared about her.
I think that, but remember, orgasm or not, when he reached up to touch her head, her both hands, to start kissing her, she pulled away. Not because because she realized that she became a little girl again. And her anger, her weak, hitting him on the chest so weakly, like a panicked little girl, was like her saying, I hate what I've become. I feel so sorry for myself. I'm helpless. Please save me. And he embraces her, not sexually, but as a loving, caring adult who wants to take care of her. You know, he's giving her in that moment what Yvonne never could, and none of her Johns ever could. And I was so moved by that when I realized, you know, as I said in my announcement, sometimes all you need is a hug, you know, and this is the symbol for what she was lacking and what she now knows she needs to have. I'm not going to write the script and say she marries Igor or they see each other ever again. That's not what it's about. It's about her recognition of her own situation. And she needed release from this horrible ordeal of her new husband betraying her to his own bossy parents.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like this was a huge, huge betrayal. And in ways her boss could never betray her, or the other girls at the club could, never bother her that much. This was the only time she'd invested in another human being, and it didn't work out. Marina?
I do.
Speaking of Igor, I saw him throughout the film as a different person, not a goon.
Uh-huh.
He lives with his grandmother. He drives his grandmother's car.
Yeah.
He talks to her about it. He mentions it. So he was brought into this situation without knowing where he's stopping him. He's strong, he's heavy, and he doesn't have any skills except for his strength. So
Right.
that's how he's brought into this situation. But he's performing moderately. He's constraining Anora, but he's not enjoying the fight. He's not being mean to her from the beginning. So if he were a goon, it would have been a different situation.
Right. But we don't know that he's not a goon because of the people he's with. And clearly he's assigned the job of being the heavy. He's warned, don't touch her, but get Yvonne back to us.
Yeah, he's doing his job, but at the same time, he's on her side. We see
That's right. He's a passive observer.
and
But you
I
see that coming, yeah.
him as a brother figure when
Yes, yeah,
they kind of bond.
yeah.
When I first raised my hand was in a different matter. It was about the judge. You mentioned that the judge doesn't object to pandemonium in the courtroom.
Yeah.
I wanted to, my opinion is the judge is bought. The judge is on the salary.
Oh, right. The mobsters got him to change
Yeah.
his docket to see them earlier. Yeah,
But
there's something funny about that.
It's to
Well, no,
have
they said he had a light
a day
calendar.
He said it, but that doesn't mean he did. It's
Well,
like,
all right, we can assume he did. I didn't think the judge was bought.
well, but there is.
The judge appeared when they wanted him to appear. The judge would have done what they wanted if he had the jurisdiction.
Yeah, but he told the bad guys to sit down and shut up. And
He tried to keep order.
and then he threw him out of the courtroom.
Yeah, eventually. Now, one thing, maybe you missed it. Toros makes a phone call to their attorney, the guy who shows up at the bottom of the steps. And he says, I don't care what you have to do, get the judge there in the morning. So that attorney did something to have the judge see them earlier. So it's not that important a deal, but the point is, yeah, they're using their political and financial muscle to have their way. That's what that seems, what
Well,
causes.
that part sounds like real life. That's how it was. But at the end of the day, the judge said, look, you guys are a bunch of clowns. Get out of my courtroom.
Right. Well, as soon as you heard it was Nevada, it's like you're not in the right court.
Guys drunk and get them up.
Yeah.
And you with the camel hair suits sit on the
Yeah, camel hair. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Sure.
You know.
I mean, there's all this kind of humor buried in every scene. You know, if you look at every character closely, the way they comment on the action is just, it's so satisfying. And I didn't see it the first time. I thought it was just this like thriller, this not a heist drama, but a caper.
I think this is like the Three Stooges meet the mafia meet a hooker.
Everybody
Not a
screws
hooker,
up.
really, an exotic dancer who's got a part-time satellite being a prostitute, but that's not the main thing she does. Who just wants to try to get rich.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of it's comical, yeah.
A lot of comedy.
But at the end of the day, it's sad, right? Because she's full of self-hatred.
Right.
And
But the point is,
finally self-realization.
I immediately saw it as sad when the first sad thing for me in the car there was she offers herself to him because that's the only way she knows how to connect with another person. You know, and the ring may have been a form of payment, but it's like, why are you so nice to me? The only way I know how to be nice to you is to have sex with you. And Linda will be right with you. And but then she realizes that she can't go through with it. And that she's looking that that's not what she really needs from him. And by crying and collapsing into his arms, that's what she needs from him. And that's why the film ends there. That's the last shot. And I thought it was very sweet. And for me, the film accomplished a lot because of that. It wasn't just a sex caper film. It wasn't just a thriller. Can we find this guy for whatever reason? It's about how does this woman educate herself through trauma and you know, through all this ridiculous action. I mean, she's feisty throughout the whole movie, you know, and except for when she's a little girl and a new bride. And it's a real story about her, you know. I mean, I don't know if it could ever happen that way, but I'm glad he made it. It's refreshing because it's so candid. Now, it played a little long for me too. I was more aware of the constant repetition of the scenes while they're searching for Yvonne. And I didn't notice it the first time I saw it, but this time I was quite aware of it. And, you know, it's 2 hours and 19 minutes long. And that's not, you know, that's really long. You know, 2 hours is getting to be long. And I think it's like the main title sequence where it's the exotic dancers ending on her enjoying herself in the blue light. And then all the examples, the anecdotes of her being a consummate professional. We didn't need that many, you know, and sometimes, and by the way, he edited this himself and won best editing for it. Sometimes when you edit things yourself that you shot, directed, you're too close to them. And one of the functions of an editor is to tell the truth about how the audience is seeing it, not how you want them to see it or how you see it as the filmmaker. And I think it got away from him, but it so deliciously got away from him. The anecdotes are so fun. You know, what's the harm? Well, the harm was it lost a lot of people, you know, especially in the first 40 minutes. But I think that's what was at play here. He didn't really quite have the awareness of how the audience would see all this. He overall in the whole story, yeah, he got it. You know, the sex work, the meet cute, the fun sex, the marriage, the efforts to annul it, the disappointment of young Yvonne abandoning her, all that plays, you know, it flows as it should. There's a little too much glue in between, was my feeling. Anybody else have that feeling? Okay.
I think it could have been cut down a little bit.
Yeah.
Some repetitiveness for sure.
Yeah, it's hard to point to any one thing that you could cut out entirely, but there are many episodes, like that scene where they get the car off the tow truck. That's a pod, you know, that's 20, 30 seconds that could go. And if you have 10 or so of those, that's 5 minutes, which is a long time, a lot of screen time. And making little excisions in the film to speed up the action makes a huge difference in the experience of time that the audience has. And you make all little trims like that, little deletions, it really accelerates the whole pace of the film and may make it more believable for you. Because you're not, the next thing that happens is more like the previous thing that happened, even though it's funny in different ways. I wanted to throw that out there that, it always helps to be aware of that the directors aren't always right 100% of the time, even if they win 5 awards. All right, well, we nailed that one, I guess. Does anybody have any other comments? We don't have to cut it short. Betty?
Yeah. I really like the humor in it, and there was one line in particular that I thought was I thought there were a lot of funny lines, but there was one in particular when the Russian mother starts yelling at her and said, "You're just a prostitute," and she comes right back with, "Yeah, and your son married me just to get even with
Yeah,
you."
that's
And
where that
then
line
the
comes from.
husband was laughing
I think,
about it.
right.
So I thought that was well done.
It is. I mean, it tells so much about the husband's relationship to her.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
what I've been telling you, for 17 years. You're too hard on the boy. It's like, so there's a lot of wisdom there. Linda, did you want to have a comment?
Yeah, just two comments. One, I know I also thought that character of Igor, he was working class and she was working class. And I
Yeah.
think there was a connection there because you have, the oligarchs and they have all the money.
Yeah.
And I think I was making a statement about that as well, that, we have all these very wealthy, billionaires that the Russian oligarchs can do whatever they want. They can have total disrespect for everybody and they get away with it. And then you have the working class people. And I think that Igor really connected with her in terms of they're both working class. And at the end, I also think it was more of her falling, her expectations were completely blown away. And this was her friend that she had somewhat of a degree of ability to take down her guard and just collapse in his arms because she was so disappointed that things didn't turn out that well. So I wanted to comment on that. And then also, I just wanted to mention the photography. Again, I had mentioned that I'm familiar with the area that the film was taken. And a lot of those scenes were so beautiful of the ocean, of the boardwalk, that scene inside of they call it the Russian nightclubs, the Tatiana, and it that's what it looks like. And for people who have never been to that location, I think the filmmaker did a really nice job of the setting. And that home is a real home. The home is on National Drive in Mill Basin, which is where I lived when I first got married. Not in that house, though.
Yeah.
And it was built by a Russian oligarch, and it's still there. And they, rented the filmmaker found this house and thought it would be a good place to illustrate the wealth of the family. So there's a credit to be given to the composition of the film too, not just the acting. That the way in which they were able to create the settings and scenes, I thought were very beautiful, and maybe in making it the best picture, some degree of acknowledgement was given to that as well.
Yeah, it's veracity. It felt real, and the filmmaking team used the location to good advantage. To have a presence in the movie that contributed to the overall. Okay, anybody else have any comments? I had one more.
I'll just offer I thought it was a good movie. I thought the best aspect of it was her acting. I thought that was stupendous.
Well, she won Best Actor, female actor.
Yeah. Anora. I thought she was stupendous, actually. The rest of it was humorous and strange. And,
it was different, It's like with all the films I see, this one jumped out at me as, wow, that was really refreshing. It was a new take on old themes,
not really realistic, when it comes to mafia types. I think they're much more brutal and sadistic and violent, and they're not so slapsticky and Three Stooges.
But I have to admit they were pretty funny.
Oh,
Anyway,
yeah, they were funny.
they certainly were. Okay. Um, so I want to move on to a topic dear to my heart, and that is not next month's screening. I don't have a date yet, but I do want to announce a program I'm hosting in person at the Resnick Chapel, uh, uh, the Gray Family Chapel in the Resnick campus on Sunset Boulevard. And it was just announced today. Uh, it's a program I call the 600-year history of the printed Haggadah. And the event is on April 7th, Monday, and Passover begins the following Saturday. And the Haggadah is like a Jewish tofu all over the diaspora. It assumes the flavor of whatever country it's in. And the Haggadah, because it's not part of a religious service, it's used in the home, was free from all those prohibitions of graven images, and it didn't have to use scripture, but it was a story of the Exodus as interpreted by the diaspora, and that's so many different iterations. Haggadahs were once hand-drawn. They were one-of-a-kind pieces of art that only the most wealthy of Jewish people could afford. And we do have a short film on one of those called The Washington Haggadah at the National Library of Congress. And there are even wine stains on that one. But it's this elaborately illustrated book with or Haggadah. And it's just a wonderful piece of work. But with the advent of the printing press, Gutenberg's press in like 1548, suddenly Jewish books could be printed. Why? Because the languages of the Catholic Church were Latin, Greek, and Hebrew, because they appropriated the Old Testament as their own. So all these printing houses that were run by Christians and the Catholic Church had the fonts of Hebrew letters. So you could easily compose a Hebrew book as you could compose one in Latin or Greek. So Jews over the centuries could not own property, could not own printing presses, but they could rent them. And they rented them where there were available Hebrew letters to be used for Hebrew books. And there's 600 years of the history of this kind of printing. And it's the gamut from serious religious books, from there are comedic Haggadahs over the centuries. There are even examples of drawings that, and I do show one, the four cups, right? Well, there's a drawing where there are three guys at a table and each one has four cups in front of them. Now, was that drawn by a Jewish artist? I don't think so, but it's a woodcut and it shows up. There's also examples of the Haggadah being used for religious discrimination, anti-Semitism, and for political purposes. So the book is used for whatever need its publisher wants and wherever there can be an audience. And the Haggadah travel along the Silk Route to China. And so there are all these Haggadahs from India and along the Silk Route where Jewish merchants settled and had families and created Jewish communities, it's all, if you don't really know what the diaspora is about, this program it's a good time, it's beautiful work. And the capstone piece is the Szyk Haggadah, which Arthur Szyk, the Polish artist, created from 1935 to 1940. And he had to get it published in London because on the ancient Egyptians, he drew swastikas, right? Hitler was in power when he was making this book. And he had to remove the swastikas to get it printed. But he left and came to New York in 1940, and they had to ship him his copies of the book. And it's a gorgeous book. And we recently, it was 8 years ago, 10 years ago, the Szyk scholar that I work with sold the original 50 plates of the book to a wealthy donor. And then they just engineered, this was 2008, they engineered the sale of the original artwork. And they agreed upon sale to digitize every one of the original plates. So the book that we'll be showing is a high-res giclée, for those of you who know, ultra high resolution dot color rendition of the original art. And it's just stunning. It's hilarious. There's humor in it. There's lots of examples that resonate today. There are shtetl Jews in hats, praying to God with uplifted hands, and there are pyramids behind them. So it mixes times and just sort of uses the Exodus story to arouse Jewish enthusiasm and a sense of that liberation is now needed. And we also can prove that there were swastikas on the book originally because we have the lab report. Actually, we have photographs. They used a fluorescent light to see beneath the paint he used to cover up the swastikas to reveal the swastikas. So that's his kind of humor. He's a very, very sarcastic guy. After coming to New York in 1940, Schick published political cartoons against the Axis powers in Japan, Italy, and Germany. Almost every day in one newspaper or magazine, he did works for the covers of Collier, Time, New York Post was his main outlet. And it's just a fascinating story of how this Haggadah carries the history of the diaspora with it and the challenges and the successes of Judaism and surviving, all these millennia to today. And there's lots of post-war Haggadahs too from the U.S. Army in Europe and kibbutzim, and it's the whole experience. So I hope you can join us there. I doubt that it will be on Zoom. We may be able to save a video of it, but it's free. It's, I believe, at 7 o'clock Monday, April 7th, in the lovely newly renovated chapel. And I hope you can all make it. And if you need to carpool, let me know. I'll get you a ride there, Natalie and Arlene. Not all the way from Palm Springs, but you'll totally, it's, believe me, I wouldn't say this just because it's mine. It's a really, it's something you will really enjoy. And I'm very proud to present it to you because I have fun with it too. So that's it. What?
If they do decide by chance to do it on Zoom, can you let us know?
Of course I will, but believe me, I know the technical state of the chapel and they're not ready to broadcast from there yet. But if somebody wants to set up a laptop, we could do a Zoom. But and actually I can play, if you ever want, I can play the PowerPoint with all the pictures in it for you in a Zoom. But so we'll see.
Jim, is there a website we can see the Schick Haggadah?
Yes, it's called Szyk, SZYK.com. And it's run by the lead scholar I worked with. He's an ex-rabbi named Irvin Ungar. And he's made his work since 1994. Made the study of Schick his life's work. The senior rabbi tossed him out of his synagogue in Burlingame because the young families liked him too much and he felt threatened. And Irvin became a Judaica broker and expert as a result, and that's how he came across the originals of the Schick Haggadah, and he started collecting Schick ephemera and examples of cartoons starting in '94. And he just sold his collection to what was once called the Spertus Museum of Jewish Culture to UC Berkeley in San Francisco. And he started his collection all over again from scratch, but he had 5,000 elements that he turned over to the museum. And so there's a lot of scholarship that goes into the presentation as well, not all mine. And I do hope you can come. And we'll have a display of the Schick Haggadah, the real one. I'm the only one who can touch it because it's worth like $15,000 now. There it is. Leslie and Paul, thank you. That's the frontispiece of the Schick Haggadah, and you can't see it, but they're the lines of Judah on top of the star, and then in the middle of the star, I forget what that image is, but who's showing me that? Leslie and Paul? Can't see it anymore, no light. But I'd rather see your face, Leslie and Paul. Okay.
There.
Paul, what's your last name so I remember you
My
better?
last name's Williams and Leslie is Berger.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so that's,
So are you LA based at all or
Yes.
near enough?
yeah, we're in LA.
Please come. And do I have your email? Do you get my announcements, Paul?
Yes, we do.
And what email do I send them to?
You're probably sending them to Leslie@leslieberger.com.
Leslie@leslieberger.com.
Right.
Okay,
That-
maybe you could
That's the one
text
I
it.
think you would have.
Okay. Maybe you could text me your information so I make sure I have the email. And my phone number is 310
Mhm.
617 7372.
Okay.
And I can send it all you need to know. And so we will have a display of many other Haggadahs, not all of them as old as, 1,000 years, but it'll give you a sample in the flesh of what other people have done. The joke is that in Israel, every family has one copy of the Shik Haggadah, but they all use Maxwell House Haggadah for their Seder.
Is that what we use, Joe? Back now? I think it is.
So, life goes on. It's like it's one of the charms of being Jewish and getting all these jokes. It's I suppose if we were Russian, we would have enjoyed the movie more, but we got plenty out of it. Okay, so that's all I have. If anybody wants to comment, um,
Do you have a time for the next Film Society?
did I record it or not? I think in April. I think it has to be. Well, we have a film tonight, so the 3rd is too early, and the 10th is busy as well. So I think it's the 17th of April. And there are lots of films that are coming online that were nominated, like Sing Sing with which is a great prison story about an acting troupe inside Sing Sing.
Jim,
Yeah.
have you seen Unbroken?
Unbroken?
Yes.
No, I haven't.
Check it out.
Okay, I'll make a note. Sounds familiar, but
It was done by a family here in our club and produced, and it's quite a story of survival.
okay, great. I just saw a film I'm trying to bring to us. Does anybody know what Chelmno was during the Holocaust? It was the first camp where Jews were killed
Selma. Yeah.
before Auschwitz, right? And it was in Poland. And it used to be a little small embassy, and the Nazis took, a castle. The Nazis took it over, and they started shooting people as they gathered them, but that was too expensive for the bullets. And then they started gassing them in trucks by piling them into trucks and channeling the exhaust back into the locked truck. And 4 people, 2 of whom are profiled in this film, escaped, the only living escapees. Now, Chelmno was destroyed, leveled to the ground, so it was hard to prove that it actually existed in the trials after the war. Chelmno trials were the first in 1945. And as they began investigating, they found the excavation, they excavated the mass graves. But these 2 guys had a really harrowing escape. And it's all about how they escape, not to just free themselves, but to get the word out that the world should know what was going on, because nobody knew. And because of their activity, they got the word out to the Warsaw Underground and then to the BBC in London. And in late 1942, it was announced to the world that Germans were killing Jews. And our country did not have a formal refugee policy until 1944. And hundreds of thousands of lives were lost because we didn't act soon enough. And I'll get into that in my discussion when I bring the film to us. But there was a lot of obstruction of Jewish immigration to the US by a really bad anti-Semite in the State Department. And FDR was kind of immune to it until it was too late. And Henry Morgenthau, the only Jewish member of FDR's cabinet, finally brought to his attention that there had been this obstruction in state. And that forced FDR to support the War Refugee Board Act of 1944. But it was, all the scholars say it was too little too late, but at least they saved some people. So this story of how did the news get out about the Holocaust really opens the lid on a huge backstory for American Jewry, which I will go into. I've done a lot of research about it in my work on Arthur Szyk, and it's fascinating. So that film has not yet been released. It's being released in Europe now. It's called The World Will Tremble. Great title. The world may have trembled, but America did not. And when they got the news. and it's debuting it's shot in Romania. And for those of you who don't know, Romania was the only country that stalled the Nazis from uh, getting to the Jews of Romania and allowed them to flee. And
Maybe Bulgaria.
Bulgaria, it's Sofia, yeah, Bulgaria. It was Bulgaria. Thank you, Steve. The areas are confused in the areas of my mind. And so it's debuting there in Sofia, in Paris, I think London, before it ever debuts here. It's a small distributor. And it was funded by a lot of Bulgarian money and shot there entirely. Beautifully shot film and beautifully orchestrated.
Jim,
Yeah.
and whoever that was who mentioned the film Unbroken, I'd like to know if it's streaming anywhere, because somebody else who invested in it recommended it to me and I can't find it.
You can find it on Prime. It's $5. If you don't like it, I'll refund it to you, Arlene.
That's fine.
Fair enough. That's a deal that I can't refuse.
Not you, Jim. It was
No,
Arlene.
I know. Yeah, I gotta pay, right? I want you to know that I'm probably the single biggest subscriber to Amazon. Certainly in my household, I am. But it's how I contribute. So there we are. There are any number of films. Sing Sing is one. I'll give you a quick preview. If I can open it up, I'll tell you. It's always this way. After the awards, then the floodgates uh, open, and all these films that were hoping for a nomination or a release, throw in the towel, and they finally take whatever they can get from Amazon or Netflix. We just saw Anora. Did I report to you on the films I saw at the Palm Springs Film Festival? Reading Lolita in Tehran. It's about a Muslim woman who flees Tehran in 1979 because she's an academic, and they came down very hard on her. But after the revolution, she decided to come back and teach again, and they were worse. The religious government really cracked down. She had to resign. She forms a book group with past students of hers, all women, and they read books and discuss their relevance. And one of the books is Lolita. So that's how it gets its title. And each of these women has a different story about why they're in the book group, and then what happens to them is also part of the story. Very well put together. There's
That was
another
the
fun.
book first. I read that
Yeah.
book a long time ago,
Yeah.
and it was very moving. It was for the people to go to meet at her house. They took a lot of risks to do that. They really wanted to be
Yeah.
there.
They had to hide it from their brothers and their husbands because the men were in charge of the women's fidelity to Islam. Another film I saw that is lovely. It's still not out yet. It's about to get a release called The Friend.
Yes, that's
And Bill Murray plays a poet who dies and leaves his Great Dane dog to one of his ex-girlfriends who doesn't want the dog. Of course, the dog grows on her with his soulful eyes. And it's a lovely, very New York film starring Emily Watts and Bingo, the dog. And it's touching, a really touching movie. And it's really.
Bill Murray.
What? It's really, again, films, maybe the theme, the content is about something, but the theme is about something else. This isn't about the dog. It's about the dog makes her come to terms with her relationship with a dead poet and move forward in her own life.
Can I ask also about a film called Bad Shabbos?
Yes, I'm trying to get it. I reached out to the filmmaker's LA, and again, his distributor was withholding it until the summer for some reason. So I want to get it. It's on my radar.
Yeah.
And we'll get him as a guest too. There's another charming film. It's not profound, but it's delightful with Steve Coogan. It's called The Penguin Lessons, and it takes place in Argentina during the purges in the 1970s.
Jim, I saw it over the weekend, and it's absolutely wonderful.
Isn't it? It's just so charming.
Absolutely wonderful. Yeah.
So take Joanne's word for it, not mine. Go see it in the theater. It's I don't mind. We'll see something. But I want you to see only good movies. And then Pink Lady, I may have mentioned this. It's about an Orthodox couple, and the husband is a closeted gay man, and the family finds out, but she wants to stay with him anyway. And it's about how this family endures that trauma. I mean, they're ultra Orthodox, and finally they divorce, but it's a peaceful divorce. It's not acrimonious. That's Pink Lady. It's kind of a low budget film, but it's entirely genuine and very moving. Uh, Janice Ian, oh my God, remember her? The Child of 16, and another song that's so popular, was popular in our youth. Um, it's a biography of her, extremely candid, film about her career, who she is, who she was, what she is now. Um, and it's just so intimate. It's like, oh, why can't all, musical biographies be this way? There is another one, a biography of, Diane Warren, which is glitzy, a beautiful film, and lots of celebrities. But it's compared to the Janice Ian film, it's glossy and surface. This goes really deep, and she's a wonderful person, and you really feel good for having learned about her story. Um, and again, these films are not on release yet. The Friend is out now. Lolita, not yet. I'm Still Here, which is about a Brazilian woman whose husband is abducted by the regime, like they did in Argentina. And she won the Golden Globes for Best Actor, Best Female Actor. Totally ignored here. Um, Wonderful performance. And it's a very deep philosophical meditation on the meaning of family and endurance and why are we all here?
Please
You know,
God.
this woman really brings it at home. So I want to get that when it's out, not yet. And then I'm looking into a bunch of older films. One of these days, I swear I'm going to show 8.5, the Fellini film. And we have to see that again if you haven't. And Mickey 1, which is an early Warren Beatty film from 1965. Maybe Dr. Strangelove. Again, these are just top films. And who knows what else is in store for us.
Right.
By the way, there is a film that was nominated for Best Actor. It's The Apprentice, about Donald Trump's rise to power and his relationship with Roy Cohn. Doesn't matter how you feel about Trump. It's an excellent film. It's called The Apprentice. And The Apprentice is available on Amazon Prime. And his performance is good. The structuring, the storytelling, really interesting. And you realize how much little Donald Trump, the innocent guy who wanted to build buildings, became the evil monster that he is through the tutelage of Roy Cohn, who was uh, uh, McCarthy's henchman in the anti-communist trials of the 50s. So very rich film and definitely worth seeing. I don't know that I want to discuss it because it's a good film, yes, but I put my time in with The Apprentice, on the TV show. So
Yeah.
I edited the first 4 seasons of The Apprentice, and finally I had to leave because I couldn't stand creating infomercials for Trump properties any longer. But I learned a lot from that show, and I'm glad it was worth the painful experience of watching him, you know. So I'm done with The Apprentice. And Bad Shabbos is on my list. And then I met a wonderful woman who's still alive. She's 82 years old. She's a chaplain for hire now. She used to work for the Malibu Synagogue and a hospital in the South Bay. And we saw her. Who saw the Braid, the last performance of the Braid at the Wilshire Boulevard? Joanne. So this was Ruth Bolonsky, the older woman who told the story of her relationship to the couple that tried to save Stephen Biko, the South African crusader, and the white couple barely makes it out alive from the country. She knew them and was part of that inner circle, as well as the other people who supported the anti-apartheid movement. She has many wonderful stories to tell, and she's agreed to be with us at some point.
These phone calls.
What? Okay. The movie that I met her over was Cry Freedom, which is a very early Denzel Washington film and a uh, an early Klein movie where they're so young you don't even recognize Kevin Kline. You don't even recognize who they are, especially Washington. So unassuming as Stephen Biko, who was a resistance leader who was eventually jailed and killed in jail by the white government of South Africa. So she'll be a very interesting guest. I just have to figure out how to present her, and more. So stay tuned. And I'm glad. It's good to talk about movies we don't all love. Because we learn a lot about each other, and I learned a lot about how it played for other people. So I have my blinders on too sometimes. So good night and good luck. Oh, by the way, George Clooney's play, about Edward R. Murrow is the top grossing play, outgrossing Othello at 2.8 million per week on Broadway. And it's the biggest moneymaker in all of Broadway history.
Did you check the prices and see how expensive
Yeah,
it
it's
is?
$912 for the ticket.
Wow.
Well, don't worry, there's some relief. The average ticket price is 302.
Yep.
Okay, so maybe I'll see you in New York sometime, but certainly I'll see you here, and hopefully on the 7th of April for the Haggadah presentation, and hopefully on, when did I say it was? The 20th?
16th or 17th.
Yeah, this is 17, next month. All right.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks
All right.
very much.
Good night.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Happy
Good
Bye.
night,
Passover to
everybody.
everybody.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.
How do I get out of here? Okay.